I remember the summer of 2002 as though it were etched into my soul, a memory that still trembles like a candle in the wind, because it was the summer a young girl named Elizabeth vanished into the shadows, and the world held its breath wondering if she would ever return, and I, Miriam, old as I am, felt the pain of that family as if it were stitched into my own heart. Because you never outgrow the anguish of knowing a child has been stolen. Elizabeth Smart was only 14, a child with golden hair and the kind of laughter that could scatter the dark clouds of any home, a child who played the harp, who dreamed of simple joys, whose family in Salt Lake City, Utah, lived what many would call an ordinary life until the night when everything shattered, June 5th. 2002, a night that began like any other, with parents tucking children into bed and sisters whispering secrets before sleep, until a man entered the home, armed with a knife, with malice in his eyes and a plan that no one could imagine, and he stole her away from her bed in the dead of night while her younger sister, Mary Catherine, lay frozen beside her, too terrified to scream, yet etched with the memory of what she saw. The intruder's shadow burned into her mind. And so began a 9-month nightmare that gripped not just a family, but an entire nation. Elizabeth was dragged into the foothills near her home, where she was forced into captivity by Brian David Mitchell, a man who claimed himself a prophet, a self-anointed zealot clothed in delusions, and by his accomplice Wanda Barzi, a woman whose silence and complicity made her as dangerous as the man himself, and there in the wilderness they bound her, threatened her, and took from her every shred of innocence. I imagine her fear, the trembling of her young hands, the questions no child should ever have to ask, and I imagine her prayers, whispered under the stars, prayers for deliverance, for her family, for the dawn that never seemed to come. While she suffered in the mountains, her family rallied below. Ed and Lois Smart, her parents, refused to yield to despair, and the community of Salt Lake City lit up with flyers, vigils, and the desperate cry for help, their daughter's face printed on every corner, their pleas echoing on national television. Mary Catherine, only 9, carried the heavy burden of having seen her sister taken, her memory the only fragile thread connecting investigators to the truth, though at first, no one believed that such a figure as Brian Mitchell could be real, her description dismissed as the wild imaginings of a child. But children see more clearly than we think, and Mary Catherine's courage became the first light in the darkness, even as days stretched into weeks, and weeks into months, and the case seemed to slip into the cold silence of unsolved tragedies. I, Miriam, would sit with the news clippings spread across my table, feeling the ache of a world that too often swallows the innocent, wondering how much one girl could endure, and how much one family could bear. In captivity, Elizabeth was forced to wear veils and robes, disguised to the point where she was unrecognizable, forced to walk in public beside her captors, silenced by threats that her family would be killed if she spoke, and no crowd saw her, though she brushed past ordinary lives in broad daylight. No one recognized her, for she was hidden in plain sight, a child camouflaged by fear and deception. 9 months is a long time in the life of a child, a long time for a mother to wait, a long time for hope to flicker and nearly die, yet Elizabeth endured, her faith, her will, her inner fire unbroken, though her body was chained, though her spirit was tested in ways unspeakable. Then came March 12th, 2003, a day that history remembers, a day when a miracle walked among ordinary people, Elizabeth was spotted walking in Sandy, Utah, with Mitchell and Barzy, her face partially obscured, but her gait, her presence stirring recognition in those who passed. Police were alerted, and when officers confronted her, asking who she was, she at first stayed silent, paralyzed by fear, until courage pushed through her trembling lips, and she said the words that would end the nightmare. "I'm Elizabeth Smart." I can almost hear her voice, weak yet steady, reclaiming her name, reclaiming her life. In that moment, the veil of darkness lifted, and a nation exhaled the breath it had been holding for 9 long months. The reunion with her family was a moment so pure, so luminous, that even time seemed to bow before it. Parents holding their daughter, tears streaming, siblings clinging to her as though never again would they let her go, the wound of loss stitched by the miracle of return. The trial that followed was long and complex, with questions of sanity, of justice, of accountability. But in the end, truth prevailed. Brian David Mitchell was sentenced to life in prison, and Wanda Barzy to 15 years. Justice delivered, though it could never erase the scars left behind. And Elizabeth, young though she was, rose not as a victim but as a survivor, her voice becoming a beacon for others, her courage transforming personal tragedy into a mission to protect the vulnerable, to fight for the missing, to ensure that no other child would suffer unseen. Miriam, watched her grow into a woman who would testify before Congress, who would advocate for children, who would write, speak, and live with a grace forged in fire, a grace that humbled even those of us who had seen much suffering. And when I think of Elizabeth Smart, I think of more than just the girl who was kidnapped. I think of the survivor who defied despair, who taught us that the human spirit, though tested, can emerge unbroken, that faith and courage can carve a path through the darkest night. Her story is not just of crime and cruelty, but of resilience, of a family's love, of a child who came home. And so, every time I hear the soft notes of a harp, I think of her, and I whisper her name into the quiet, grateful that in a world full of shadows, there are still lights that refuse to go out.